And I grew up in a Black middle class uh, urban congregation, United Church of Congregation, in the early days of the UCC as we know it, not too long after the merger between the Congregational Christian Church and the Evangelical Reformed Church. So my mother was 19 or so when she joined Heritage United Church of Christ in Baltimore. I was one. So I guess I'm one of the early people to have actually grown up in the UCC. And this particular congregation was very dynamic. Grew up under a pastor, really an extended family uncle to me by the name of Wendell Phillips, who really, between him and other elders in the church who were very active on the political scene and in organizing and activism, really imparted a sense of the fact that our lives and our faith was more than just showing up on Sunday and more than just singing the hymns and praying the prayers. And so it meant being involved in political campaigns. It meant, watching him and his allies be able to successfully sue the Baltimore mayoral administration for racism. It meant listening to the stories of him and Martin, him and Malcolm, both of which he knew and was friends with. And so there was a sense of watching him and other elders in my congregation really be social politically active. And I'm very thankful that that got into me at a young age. Now, having said all of that, it was around the middle school years and through high school years that I got caught up into a much more right-wing theological path through some conservative radio ministries and conservative congregations. And for a time then during those teen years, I was the little right-wing Bible thumping, you better get saved right now, you're damned to hell. I can remember I used to carry a Bible to track practice. I mean, that type of thing. And therefore, as one might guess, my social political analysis took a rightward bent. It was very much the little Reaganite at the time, and very pro-military and what have you. And I spent, a few of the teen years in this, and grew back out of that really during college undergrad years that I spent in DC. I went to American University, but I think being in that DC atmosphere, being around the diversity of thought there really began to challenge a lot of my ultra-conservative sensibilities that I kind of slipped into for a minute. And after a while, 2 + 2 just wasn't adding up to 4 in my mind in terms of this very conservative thought. And, those undergrad years can be very formative. And so when you're talking about the early and mid 80s, you're talking about mobilizing against Reagan's conservative economics. And you're talking about the anti-apartheid movement to end South African apartheid, which was very formative for me in terms of developing a more progressive and activist social political stance. You're talking about everything that was happening in Latin America during the 80s and trying to call U.S. government to the carpet on what it was doing in Nicaragua and El Salvador and et cetera. And so by the time I had finished undergrad in 86, I was looking to do some things more progressively. And so I had the opportunity to spend a year from 88 to 89 in Lesotho in Southern Africa as a part of the anti-apartheid movement, looking at anti-apartheid issues in the Southern region, looking at development issues, trying to emphasize grassroots bottom-up development, and some things like that. I was at an ecumenical group called Transformation Resource Center that at the time was both indigenous and expatriate, has become all indigenous since. And that was, as I'd say, through the auspices, or I think I said that it was through the auspices of the UCC. That was through what was then known as the United Church Board for World Ministries. And so you can see the change. You can see the turnabout in terms of where my head was social politically. And you can see that it always was related to a faith standpoint. Even when I slipped into a very right-wing standpoint, that was coming from my then interpretation of faith and faith walk. And certainly ever since then, ever since coming out of that, all of my social political action or views or frameworks have been tied to faith, because for me, there is a natural, there's a seamless relationship between being a person of faith, being a person who claims a belief in the divine, and therefore wants to see the divine in the creation, in each other, and therefore wants to see the creation treated with the respect that the divine creation should be treated with, and therefore wants evil and oppression and all of these systemic isms to end. There's a natural, seamless relationship between that type of faith outlook and what it calls us to do in terms of social political action. Now, once you get past that, it veers all kinds of ways in terms of what people believe, should be done. But the idea that people of faith, people of any type of progressive, or as I've more recently identified with more radical and radical left sense, more radical faith, we have to be involved in efforts to transform society. We don't actually have a choice. If we take our faith seriously, and if we take this matter of the divine seriously, we have no choice but to express that faith through action, through the attempts of transformation of society.